Welcome to another edition of Jazz Smack Postgame, where the Jazz played at home tonight in the Delta Center against the Chicago Bulls. For the Jazz, this was another clear development game that ended in a loss. Let's talk about it.
Jazz Smack, your source for information and analysis about the Utah Jazz and NBA basketball. Jazz Smack is a community for passionate Utah Jazz NBA fans.
Sometimes it's hard to really gauge what the overall strategy is for this Jazz franchise under the leadership of Danny Ainge, Justin Zanuck, the owner Ryan Smith, and Coach Hardy. My personal feeling is I don't agree with what they're doing overall. I agree with trying to get the best lottery position possible in these first few seasons. I think it's immoral, but the overall strategy is necessary because this is what the NBA has presented the Jazz with. This is the system that the Jazz have to work within. And to best maximize their future, they need to lose games and get the lottery position. Right now, the Jazz have the worst record in the entire NBA. They have overtaken Washington for statistically the worst record in the league right now. And I actually hope that that's where they stay for the rest of the season. That's the best case scenario. Now, they have the same number of wins right now, the last time I checked, entering tonight, as Washington, but they also have few more losses. So they're statistically better right now, but presumably if neither team wins more games, they're going to end with exactly the same record, and I'm not sure who has the advantage at that point. I think actually the Jazz may be playing Washington at home coming up here. So something will change between those two records. Obviously, one of those teams, if that's the case, one of those teams will have another win. But right now, I don't agree with that part of it. My complaint with it is what they're trying to do in their style of play and how the philosophy behind the team on both sides of the ball and the overall style of play that's being employed. That's my complaint, and that's what I don't like. I don't like this new era of basketball in the NBA overall, and I think that many of the fans agree with me there because the viewership in the United States has obviously declined. And a lot of it is, some of it was politics, obviously, but a lot of it is just simply the style of play in that most of the teams are running similar type of, people really don't run plays anymore. They have this new thing called actions, and the teams are running similar actions with similar type of results. There are some teams that do more in the mid-range than others. Like OKC, this is the strength of OKC, is they have one of the best mid-range players in the NBA in Shea, and they have another one of the best mid-range players in the NBA in Jalen Williams, Cody's brother. Those two guys are really good in the mid-range game, and that gives that team a clear advantage. But the style of play still isn't that dissimilar in terms of the overall philosophy of the offense as most of the other teams in the league. They still shoot a lot of threes. They still spread the court. They still play a lot with the dribble and all of those things. My complaint with it is with the Jazz, both sides of the ball need to be addressed. This isn't one or the other. This isn't just an offense versus defensive thing. Both sides need to be addressed. Now, the Jazz statistically, just within the NBA, statistically, they're one of the worst defensive teams in the league. The Jazz, they switch everything, and that's common in the NBA right now. They're constantly switching picks. Walker gets stuck with guarding a guard up top who's much quicker and much more skilled at the ball than Walker is athletically. Obviously, Walker's 7 feet trying to guard a 6'5" guy up at the top, and so Walker ends up in this situation a lot because the Jazz are so readily switching those screens and putting Walker into that position. I would prefer that the Jazz try and fight over more of those screens rather than just automatically switching. That's one of the things that I think should change. They need to do less switching, and they need to fight hard over those picks. I mean, if you're just automatically switching and getting a person into a really bad situation like Walker at the top of up top above the 3-point line where he's isolated against a much quicker, I mean, that's just a really bad situation. It's a bad situation. It's a tough position to put Walker into. Now, Walker moves his feet extremely well for somebody his size, but still, there's no way that he can keep up with some of these smaller guys. So that's one of the things I would like to see the Jazz address just on the defensive end. But overall, they need to get tougher. They have to get tougher on defense. There has to be more physical contact. There has to be a greater emphasis, a greater effort being placed by all the players. And if guys aren't placing that effort on the defensive end, quite frankly, they just need to be removed from the game. And there are a couple of guys on the team right now that often and consistently lack effort on the defensive end. And that has to be addressed. If those guys aren't going to play defense, and one of them is an older player, but one of them is a second-year player, if those guys aren't going to play defense, they need to be removed and put on the bench until they decide, well, I'm going to give 100% effort on defense. The Jazz are not going to be an elite team without developing better habits on the defensive end. And right now, it's just the Jazz defense is a sieve. I mean, it is brutally bad. It's not just philosophy, it's effort, it's execution of just the most basic things. And it's really frustrating. It's really frustrating. So they have to address that, especially with Walker as an anchor, as one of the premier big rim defenders, paint defenders, and shot blockers in the NBA. Walker has some unique skills in that area, and he's very gifted athletically for his size and length. And the Jazz they have to be one of the better defenders, best defensive players in the best defensive teams in the NBA. They must be one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. With Walker as the anchor point, they have to be better. I mean, you can't be less than average. That's inexcusable and unacceptable. So first and foremost, the Jazz must be better on the defensive end. And if they really want to be an elite team, they need to get into the top 10 at the very least. And I would say they have to shoot for the top 5. And so far in the 3 years of Hardy, I haven't seen that they're going to ever do that. So that's a definite problem. And Ainge himself has said, in the offseason, he said, well, we have to improve defensively. And here the Jazz are really poor defensively yet again. So are they going to do something about it? I have a feeling they're not. They're not going to do anything about it. So switching to offense, and I've said this before, you have Lowry, who has some incredible gifts offensively. And he's a really unique player. He has a very quick release. He's 7 feet tall. He can shoot it. He's athletic. He's strong. But Lowry is not a guy that you're going to put into an isolation situation and hope for a good outcome from that. First of all, he's not a passer. So Lowry is not, he's just not an adept. He's not a skilled passer. He really isn't. There are other things that Lowry is really good at. Passing is not one of them. Ball handling is another one that he's not really good at. So the Jazz right now, when he is getting the ball within the 3-point line, he's getting the ball most often with the back to his his back to the basket in like a high post situation, and he's just having to shoot over the top of somebody, and that's a really difficult thing to do. He's being put into a difficult situation, so he's just having to try and make shots over the top of people, and even if it's a smaller player, that's a difficult position to be put in. He would be much better off receiving the ball on the move, where he's coming off a pick inside of the 3-point line, not one of the picks that's above the 3-point line or right near the 3-point line. One of the picks that's far inside the 3-point line, where he can get the ball on the move and actually do something with it, where he's just not trying to shoot over the top of somebody. That would be a much better utilization of Lowry's skills. I mean, he's having a really poor year shooting the ball overall, and he's having a poor year shooting the ball from 3. I mean, tonight he was 1 for 8 from 3 again. Last night, he didn't shoot the ball from 3 well at all. And it's just, there's just so much more they could do with him and his size and his skills than what they're doing. And overall, as an overall philosophy of the offense, rather than setting all these picks, off-ball picks, the off-ball picks that they do set are up right, most of them are up right around the 3-point line or above the 3-point line, trying to get guys open for threes. And tonight, the Jazz shot, 9 for 42 from the 3-point line. I mean, that makes for a really difficult viewing experience for anybody trying to watch the game, whether you're in the arena or, sitting in your chair at home watching the game on TV. It just makes it really difficult. And it would be so much better if they just changed some things and made it more interesting to try and diversify the offense and trying to run more sets. And actually, instead of trying to run actions, actually just call some plays. Just actually run some plays. I mean, it's simple stuff. And the Jazz also need to they need to bring somebody in, one of the coaches that knows how to run an old school fast break, where somebody rebounds it, they get it to the wing to the point guard, and then the guys run wide. The point guard gets the ball into the middle of the floor, and the people go to the wings and run hard on the wings, and then wide on the wings, and then cut towards the basket. The old school way of running a fast break, the proper way. Now the Jazz never do that, and the Jazz didn't do that under Quinn Snyder either, and it was really frustrating. I mean, it was frustrating under Snyder. It was frustrating now. It's just frustrating. Now, Collier is a good guy to be able to do that. They actually have a point guard who's really fast with the ball in his hands, similar to the way Stockton and Green were really fast with the ball in their hands. And Isaiah could certainly push it. He could push it for himself to get layups, to get ahead of the defense. He can do that. But he's also very capable of getting the ball to guys in a position to make dunks and layups, running fast breaks the old school way. I'm not opposed to shooting threes off the fast break in a secondary break, but you first try and get layups and dunks. That's what I'm asking for, and that's what I hope. I hope more of the NBA teams return to that rather than just jacking threes off the fast break as a first option. I mean, run the breaks to get layups and dunks. I mean, start with that. But also the philosophy behind just in general of how they're running the offense. I mean, go back to some of the tried and true ways of the past and diversify the offense so it's not just so monotonous of this same stuff over and over and over. And it would just make it so much more interesting to watch from, a spectator's perspective. It just would. I know that I can't be the only one sitting here watching this and going, okay, we're 9 for 42 from 3. That is just, that's brutal. It's brutal. I mean, shooting 20% from 3 and taking 43s is a brutal night. It just is. So it's frustrating. I mean, I hate to be negative, but it's just hard. It really is. I mean, at times you just wish you could go back in time and watch something different. Some other just style of play that something is different than this. And the NBA could certainly address some of this through rules changes and things like that. I'm still an advocate of moving the 3-point line back a bit and then running it into the sideline so there are no more side threes. I would like to see that change employed. I'm not opposed to eliminating illegal defense altogether. That's what I had actually hoped what they would do when they had all those illegal defenses back in the 80s and 90s. That I was hoping that the league would actually change and then just get rid of illegal defense altogether, but they actually didn't do that. They got rid of the current illegal defense and just switched it to a different type of illegal defense, but they didn't actually say that you can just defend any way you want. And I would actually prefer that the teams be able to defend any way they want. I mean, that would certainly be worth a try to see what happens based on what is currently happening with the NBA, with all the threes and just teams just lining up behind the 3-point line and running all their offense beyond the 3-point line. It's just not that interesting. So I watched speaking of Lowry, going back to the Lowry thing, I watched the Stacey King. Stacey King is the color commentator for the Chicago Bulls. He has been for a number of years now. But it's actually the Bulls are one of the more enjoyable broadcast teams to watch in the NBA, just because Stacey King comes across as a decent dude. As a commentator, he comes across as a decent dude. And I admit that when I watch the Jazz games, I mute it. And I split my residence, but when I'm in Utah and I am forced to watch the Jazz broadcast rather than the away broadcast, I mute it. I don't actually listen to the commentators. I just listen to it in silence. I watch it in silence, I should say. But the Chicago Bulls is one of the broadcast teams that I actually enjoy. Well, one of the things he said tonight, which was rather funny, so Vucevic was trying to guard Lowry when Lowry he got the ball on the perimeter, and he went by Vuce, and he basically, I think, either dunked it or laid it up. And Stacey King said, okay, well, Vuce has to do something more than just be a traffic cone. And I thought that summed up the story of Vuce's NBA career in one line. That's exactly right. Vuce is talk about not giving effort all the time. That guy is the epitome of that. And that's why all those years that he was in Orlando, those teams lost. He's in Chicago, not great. It would be so nice from a Chicago Bulls perspective if the Chicago Bulls, they were finally able to move on from Zach LaVine, and I was an advocate for that, but they need to move on from Vooch as well. That team desperately needs to move on from Vooch, and I think that Billy Donovan needs to go elsewhere as well. He's been there quite a while. I think that it's time for him to just move on. So I really hope that the Bulls have not been good for a long time. I mean, they won some games when Derrick Rose was there, but that didn't really last that long because Derrick Rose's health, pretty much failed him, and his knees just didn't hold up. But Billy Donovan, Vooch, they need to be moved on. Please, Chicago, move those guys on for the betterment of that franchise. So right now, the Jazz are, like I said, in last place. So they're looking really good for the lottery. The lottery isn't that far away, and we will know where the Jazz select. And that's going to be a really big night for the franchise. And I think that the Jazz, for the rest of this season, they're obviously just going to focus on player development, and they're going to close it out with a bunch of losses for the most part. That looks like what it's going to turn out to be. I would assume at some point, is Jordan Clarkson going to play through the end of the year, playing significant minutes? I don't know if he is or not, but I think the Jazz are missing an opportunity to develop the younger players more than what they are right now by playing Jordan so many minutes. And Jordan's still consuming a lot of minutes. I mean, and I don't see how that is helpful to the Jazz franchise long term. I honestly don't. And I complain about this every broadcast, but it's just from a basketball standpoint, it's not in the Jazz's best interest to play Jordan Clarkson right now. So I at some point, I hope they just shut him down and play the younger guys. They're obviously not going to, if they get another couple wins this year, that's not going to break the bank, so to speak, but getting any more than a couple, I would be surprised, and it would be really disappointing if they got more than a couple. So at most, I hope they just get a couple more wins this year. I mean, they don't have very many games left. They're obviously losing every game, and it would be shocking if that changed. I mean, why would they win games right now? It doesn't make any sense. But why to spend development time that could be going to the youth on the team and giving it to Clarkson? I mean, he's not helping him develop good habits. Jordan has some really bad habits. So it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now. So I hope they shut Jordan down at some point. But anyway, I mean, we can take a look at the box score really quick, but you know, there's not a whole lot to say. You know, Keyonte, he played some significant minutes tonight. He shot the ball fairly well, and he went at the free throw a bunch of times. So, you know, he tied for the high score with 16 points, 4% from the field, 7% from the free throw line, 1 for 3 on threes, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 4 turnovers, 2 steals. But overall, there's really not a lot of bright points in the box score. I mean, the minutes were kind of spread out amongst a lot of different players, where a bunch of players were playing. You know, Bryce played 20 minutes. Filipowski played 24 minutes. Jordan played 21 minutes. Keyonte, the 27 minutes. Juzang, 16 minutes. Collier, 26 minutes. Cody Williams, 27 minutes. Walker, 31 minutes. Lowry, 24 minutes. And Micah, 23 minutes. So I think that it would just be, to close out the year, I think it would be in the Jazz best interest to just go ahead and play the guys who actually have a future with the franchise and give them the development time. They're going to have the losses, and we all want the losses, but the minutes and that opportunity to develop those players, I think, is meaningful right now. It's really important. And so get those guys and try and, you know, put them in a position to develop good habits on the court, good practice habits, good habits in the weight room. You know, all those things need to be hammered home, and the development the development time on the court, I mean, it's super valuable, and just squander it on players who aren't going to be with the Jazz long term, who are clearly not going to be with the Jazz long term. It's just, in my opinion, it's a mistake. So have the minutes consumed by players who have either asset value with the Jazz, meaning John Collins, Markkanen, or who will be most likely with the team long term. You know, obviously Filipowski and Isaiah Collier. Cody Williams is still a rookie. I mean, his minutes are valuable right now. So those are the guys that I think that and Bryce, I certainly put Bryce into that situation too. And Keyonte is obviously an asset, and Johnny deserves time as well. I think Johnny has shown that he can stick in the NBA, so he deserves time as well. But anyway, there's really not a whole lot to say about this game other than that. It was really another disjointed game, and it was just there was no flow to it. It was just it wasn't pleasing from the eye test standpoint. It just wasn't a pleasing game. But anyway, those are my thoughts after watching the game for this evening. And please, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe. And you can also follow us on X at Jazz Smack. And the NCAA tournament obviously starts this week. And so a lot of focus from those people who are interested in basketball are going to be on the tournament rather than the NBA games. But we will still be doing we will certainly still going to do the post-game NBA game, post-game Jazz talk after each Jazz game. And maybe we can even do some of the college stuff too. So, anyway, until the next one, please, everybody, have a great night, and thanks for following along. Good night, everyone.